Okay, so yesterday we saw Peter's strategy for believers living as exiles or aliens in the world to turn from sin, embrace good conduct, and anticipate God's transforming work. He then applies it to Christians in situations of powerlessness. And this continues in chapter 3, where he writes to husbands and wives. Now, this can be a controversial area, not least of all because there's evidence that Peter's words, wives, be subject to your husbands, have been used to justify terrible things in the church and world, to excuse oppressive treatment of women, and even to excuse domestic violence or abuse. So let's be 100% clear that neither God, nor Jesus, nor Peter, nor any New Testament writers would in any way say it's okay for husbands to abuse their wives or that women should accept it if they do. That is not what is being encouraged here. And for anyone who suffered such abuse or witnessed it or carried it out, that is not okay. And so that's what's not being said. But what is going on here? Well, the situation is these wives have come from Gentile backgrounds, families where Jesus wasn't known, but they've come to meet the Lord, and now they're part of God's chosen people. But their husbands haven't followed them. This is what Peter means when he says the husbands do not obey the word. So how can these wives hope to bring their husbands to Christ with the limited power they have? Well, says Peter, not simply by more words. In fact, the opposite. He speaks of husbands being won without a word by the conduct of their believing wives. Now, Peter's not against speaking, but instead of an avalanche of words, Peter says a husband's transformation may come when he sees the purity and reverence of his wife's life and when she subjects herself to him. And such servant-heartedness and being subject to isn't passive or weak, but radical and strong. It draws its strength from the gospel of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit. And so when a Christian wife freely cares for her husband, serves him and ministers to him, she displays Jesus Christ to him. Next, Peter mentions appearance or adorning. So why is this? Well, let's assume he's still working on the same idea. How can these women help their husbands come to know Jesus? And Peter's saying, don't think you can woo them to Christ simply by outward beauty and show. It'll be love and service and distinctiveness of character that will ultimately win them over. So Peter's not being dismissive of beauty here, but don't set your confidence in that. Don't value it like the world does, and don't use it to manipulate or get your own way. Next, Peter turns to speak to husbands. And if wives generally found themselves in situations of powerlessness in the first century, husbands found themselves in positions of power. And this comes with its own challenges and temptations. And so Peter challenges these too. Firstly, transformation comes from understanding and honouring others, not force or coercion. Now, to honour someone is a big deal. It is to elevate them, prioritise them, put them above you. In other words, it's very similar to what he's just said to wives, but these words are to the married men. So here, Peter is challenging the common thing to do with power and strength, and again, turning it on its head. Use it instead to love and to serve and to honour. Perhaps another temptation for a Christian husband might be to ignore his wife. He's not forceful, just disengaged. And Peter again is saying, don't be so stupid. If you're both following Jesus, you share together in God's grace now and in the hope of life to come. You're partners, equals, you need one another. And recognizing that and working together will bring life to your prayers. Then in verses 8 to 12, we've a more general call to all believers to live a life of blessing. Bless, says Peter, for to this you were called. And so if part of the purpose of the church is to declare God's excellencies, which we saw yesterday, Another purpose of the church is to be a blessing. And again, Peter describes what a life of blessing looks like. It's a life that's loving and tender-hearted, humble and holy. And then finally, in verses 13 to 22, there's another shift in theme. And Peter begins to apply his teaching to times when the church is facing suffering and hardship. And whilst many of the ideas here are similar, Peter also goes on this strange journey, really, telling us about imprisoned spirits from the days of Noah. Now, there are lots of theories about what this is about. It's kind of confusing. But Peter seems to be drawing parallels between the experience of the church, of Jesus, and of Noah and his family. And the consistent theme in each is Christ's victory over suffering and evil, and that being the way of salvation. So Jesus suffered at the hands of evil, verse 18, but was victorious through his victory, and he saves us now through that. He brings us to God. Noah also suffered at the hands of evil, but remained faithful to God and was saved. And so the victory of Jesus over evil is also proclaimed here to those who opposed God. And now the church suffers at the hands of evil. But through faithfulness to God, expressed through baptism, we are also saved by the victory of Jesus. And Jesus is the one who's now in heaven at the right hand of God, utterly and truly victorious, and one day all will see that. But it's this vision of the victorious Jesus Christ Peter wants the church to have now as it seeks to bless the world, even in times of suffering and struggle.